At this point, we've planted a lot of trees. We planted some rocks, some grasses. We put some background trees. We have a couple different biomes. Let's talk about performance again, which is something we should have been doing throughout this, but we didn't do too much yet. So this is a good place to check. And I'm going to show you kind of the things you can do to see how much the things that we did, how they impacted performance. So let's go back in here and we have, we got our background trees and we haven't done a lot. I don't think we're going to be taxing this computer very much, but I do want to show you kind of how you can turn things on and off and take a look at performance. So remember that when we go into this like game play mode by hitting play here, and it'll take a second, I'll speak through this. Changes that we make while in game mode don't necessarily get saved, okay? And I say don't necessarily. Um, we got to be careful because some things do. Remember, anything that we create and change in our project do. So when you're messing with VSPro settings, you have to keep that in mind that if the VSPro, if you're changing stuff that maybe changes your persistent storage, well, where is that kept? Well, that's kept in a database. Remember here inside of the biomes and mask, we created these biomes in here. We created our persistent storage in here. So that's where they're kept, not really in the scene. So if we do anything that changes these, they will be changed permanently whether we come in and out of game mode, okay? So let me go back, let me see here. And let's just back up a tad here. Go forward a little bit. Go up in the air, back down. I'm just trying to get a better camera angle so you guys can kind of get, and I'm sorry if I'm making you dizzy or sick, nausea. There we go. I got the clipping here because I'm messing with the trend. That's good enough right here, I think. Just so we have, okay, so let me hit the M key. That way my mouse won't move anything here. And you see I'm getting 80 frames per second, which is still pretty good. Remember, I benchmark this GPU so that I know that this GPU, I can get down to about 30 frames per second. Yours might be higher than or lower than that. And right now I've got 16.6.9 million tries and I got 2,000 batches, which is very reasonable. But let's say I want to figure out, what is causing some performance issues. Well, one of the things I can immediately do is if I come up here to VSPro and I just uncheck that, it turns off everything VSPro just did. And look at my frames per second. So my VSPro is hitting me at well over 200, no, not 200, it was 80. So like 150, 160 frames per second hit from VSPro. That's pretty typical. I mean, VSPro is going to be, in vegetation, grasses and rocks are going to be the most taxing thing on a system. So enabling that obviously is a huge hit on performance. But let's say that we want to get a little bit more granular than that. We want to great, so Vegetation Studio Pro, is there something within Vegetation Studio Pro causing these problems? Well, over here, I got my whole one biome. What can I do? Well, I can just disable my whole one biome and I can see now what the impact of whole one biome is on my frames per second. I can turn that back on. These actually should, if I turn these off, my performance should go down because if I do that, I'm actually adding more vegetation, right? But this is pretty minimal at this point. My background trees, let's see what the frame per second hit on that is. So I'm at about 80 right now. I didn't think they would impact it that much, and they don't. We're losing maybe 8 frames per second from my background trees, so that's actually not too bad. I turn those back on. And now what else can we do? Well, we can go into, let's say, my biomass here, and let's go down to edit biomes. Let's go through my first biome. And now I can go down here and I can say, well, what about this rock? Well, I can turn off runtime. And now I can see that that rock is impacting about 2 frames per second. I can go through every single tree in here and turn them off one at a time in my biome, right? And see what the impact. And if I turn them all off, it's essentially like turning off the entire biome, right? So you get the point. Whereas I can go back here and I can see, is there one particular tree that is causing a huge impact on performance? Is it this one rock or is it this grass? And then you can start to change that as well. Okay, so that's another way that you can look at these things. And then also we have the ability to go into persistent storage and do the same thing. Let me go up to persistent storage. Sorry, I had to pause there. I couldn't remember where I disabled persistent storage. So if we want to see, we planted some stuff with persistent storage, this tree, and remember the stuff around the pond down here. Well, we come into our Vegetation Studio Pro, we go to persistent vegetation storage, stored vegetation, and we hit disable. It'll take a second, but now we can turn off our persistent storage and you can see what the impact on that is. And you can see that's pretty minimal, but we haven't really planted a lot with it either. So this is just a way of moving around Vegetation Studio Pro and checking its performance and seeing if there's ways to change it. Yeah, that's it. On to the next section.